Welcome back, everyone, to Simon and the Word. I'm Simon. This is the Word. It's not my word, it's God's word, and we're cutting right through it. We're in Genesis chapter 39. Jacob's sons have sold their brother into slavery, and now we're going to see what God does with him. God does never ever abandon his own. Let's see. Genesis chapter 39. The Ishmaelites took Joseph to Egypt and sold him to Potiphar, the king's official in charge of the palace guard. So Joseph lived in the home of Potiphar, his Egyptian owner. Soon Potiphar realized that the Lord was helping Joseph to be successful in whatever he did. Potiphar liked Joseph and made him his personal assistant, putting him in charge of his house and all of his property. Because of Joseph, the Lord began to bless Potiphar's family and fields. Potiphar left everything up to Joseph, and with Joseph there, the only decision he had to make was what he wanted to eat. Joseph was well built and handsome, and Potiphar's wife soon noticed him. She asked him to make love to her, but he refused and said, "My master isn't worried about anything in his house, because he has placed me in charge of everything he owns. No one in my master's house is more important than I am. The only thing he hasn't given me is you, and that's because you are his wife. I won't sin against God by doing such a terrible thing as this." She kept begging Joseph day after day, but he refused to do what she wanted or even to go near her. One day, Joseph went to Potiphar's house to do his work, and none of the other servants were there. Potiphar's wife grabbed hold of his coat and said, "Make love to me." Joseph ran out to the house, leaving her hanging onto his coat. When this happened, she called in her servants and said, "Look, this Hebrew has come to make fools of us. He tried to rape me, but I screamed for help. And when he heard me scream, he ran out of the house, leaving his coat with me." Potiphar's wife kept Joseph's coat until her husband came home. Then she said, "That Hebrew slave of yours tried to rape me, but when I screamed for help, he left his coat and ran out of the house." Potiphar became very angry and threw Joseph in the same prison where the king's prisoners were kept. While Joseph was in prison, the Lord helped him and was good to him. He even made the jailer like Joseph so much that he put him in charge of the other prisoners and of everything that was done in the jail. The jailer did not worry about anything because the Lord was with Joseph and made him successful in all that he did. Wow. Now we're in Genesis chapter 40. While Joseph was in prison, both the king's personal servant and his chief cook made the king angry, so he had them thrown into the same prison with Joseph. They spent a long time in prison, and Potiphar, the official in charge of the palace guard, made Joseph their servant. One night, each of the two men had a dream, but their dreams had different meanings. The next morning, when Joseph went to see the men, he could tell they were upset, and he asked, "Why are you so worried today?" "We each had a dream last night," they answered, "and there is no one to tell us what they mean." Joseph replied, "Doesn't God know the meaning of dreams? Now tell me what you dreamed." The king's personal servant told Joseph, "In my dream I saw a vine with 3 branches. As soon as it budded, it blossomed, and its grapes became ripe. I held the king's cup and squeezed the grapes into it, and then I gave the cup to the king." Joseph said, "This is the meaning of your dream. The 3 branches stand for 3 days, and in 3 days the king will pardon you. He will make you his personal servant again, and you will serve him his wine just as you used to do. But when these good things happen, please don't forget to tell the king about me so I can get out of this place. I was kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, and here in Egypt I haven't done anything to deserve being thrown in jail." When the chief cook saw that Joseph had given a good meaning to the dream, he told Joseph, "I also had a dream. In it I was carrying 3 bread baskets stacked on top of my head. The top basket was full of all kinds of baked things for the king, but birds were eating them." Joseph said, "This is the meaning of your dream. The 3 baskets are 3 days, and in 3 days the king will cut off your head. He will hang your body on a pole, and birds will come and peck at it." 3 days later, while the king was celebrating his birthday with a dinner for his officials, he sent for his personal servant and the chief cook. He put the personal servant back in his old job and had the cook put to death. Everything happened just as Joseph had said it would, but the king's personal servant completely forgot about Joseph. Great, right? Genesis chapter 41. 2 years later, the king of Egypt dreamed he was standing beside the Nile River. Suddenly, 7 fat, healthy cows came up from the river and started eating grass along the bank. Then 7 ugly, skinny cows came up out of the river and ate the fat, healthy cows. When this happened, the king woke up. The king went back to sleep and had another dream. This time 7 full heads of grain were growing on a single stalk. Later 7 other heads of grain appeared, but they were thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed the 7 full heads. Again the king woke up, and it had only been a dream. The next morning the king was upset. So he called in his magicians and wise men and told them what he had dreamed. None of them could tell him what the dreams meant. The king's personal servant said, "Now I remember what I was supposed to do. When you were angry with me and your chief cook, you threw us both in jail in the house of the captain of the guard. One night we both had dreams, and each dream had a different meaning. A young Hebrew who was a servant of the captain of the guard was there with us at the time. When he told him our dreams, he explained what each of them meant, and everything happened just as he said it would. I got my job back and the cook was put to death." The king sent for Joseph, who was quickly brought out of jail. He shaved, changed his clothes, and went to the king. The king said to him, "I had a dream, yet no one can explain what it means. I am told that you can interpret dreams." "Your Majesty," Joseph answered, "I can't do it myself, but God can give a good meaning to your dreams." Well, that's a great answer, right? He said, "I can't interpret dreams, but God can." And we got to remember that, right? It's not us that does things. It's not us. It's not us. It's God. He does it through us. Remember that. It is such a blessing. It's such a blessing to be used by God to do something, whether it's making a cup of coffee for your brother or sister or interpret a dream. It's a blessing to be used by God. Don't forget it. "Your Majesty," Joseph answered, "I can't do it myself, but God can give a good meaning to your dreams." The king told Joseph, "I dreamed I was standing on the bank of the Nile River. I saw 7 fat, healthy cows come up out of the river, and they began feeding on the grass. Next, 7 skinny, bony cows came up out of the river. I've never seen such terrible-looking cows anywhere in Egypt. The skinny cows ate the fat ones, but you couldn't tell it because these skinny cows were just as skinny as they were before. Right away, I woke up. I also dreamed that I saw 7 heads of grain growing on one stalk. The 7 heads were full and ripe. Then 7 other heads of grain came up. They were thin and scorched by a wind from the desert. These heads of grain swallowed the full ones. I told my dreams to the magicians, but none of them could tell me the meaning of the dreams." Joseph replied, "Your Majesty, both of your dreams mean the same thing, and God in them has shown what he is going to do. The 7 good cows stand for 7 years, and so do the 7 good heads of grain. The 7 skinny cows, ugly cows that came up later also stand for 7 years, as do the 7 bad heads of grain that were scorched by the east wind. The dreams mean there will be 7 years when there won't be enough grain. It is just as I said. God has shown what he intends to do. For 7 years, Egypt will have more than enough grain. But that will be followed by 7 years when there won't be enough. The good years of plenty will be forgotten, and everywhere in Egypt, people will be starving. The famine will be so bad that no one will remember that there had been plenty. God has given you 2 dreams to let you know that he has definitely decided to do this and that he will do it soon. Your Majesty, you should find someone who is wise and will know what to do so that you can put him in charge of all Egypt. Then appoint some other officials to collect 1/5 of every crop harvested in Egypt during the 7 years when there is plenty. Give them the power to collect the grain during those good years and to store it in your cities. It can be stored until it is needed during the 7 years when there won't be enough grain in Egypt. This will keep the country from being destroyed because of the lack of food." The king and his officials liked this plan, so the king said to them, "No one could possibly handle this better than Joseph, since the Spirit of God is with him." Oh, so everybody could see it, and when God is in you, it's evident to everybody around you. All right? Since the Spirit of God is with him. The king told Joseph, "God is the one who has shown you these things. No one else is as wise as you are or knows as much as you do. I'm putting you in charge of my palace, and everybody will have to obey you. No one will be over you except me. You are now governor of all Egypt." Then the king took off his royal ring and put it on Joseph's finger. He gave him fine clothes to wear and placed a gold chain around his neck. He also let him ride in the chariot next to his own, and people shouted, "Make way for Joseph." So Joseph was governor of Egypt. The king told Joseph, "Although I'm king, no one in Egypt is to do anything without your permission." He gave Joseph the Egyptian name Zaphenath Paneah, and he let him marry Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, a priest in the city of Heliopolis. Joseph traveled all over Egypt. Joseph was 30 when the king made him governor, and he went everywhere for the king. For 7 years there were big harvests of grain. Joseph collected and stored up the extra grain in the cities of Egypt near the fields where it was harvested. In fact, there was so much grain that they stopped keeping record because it was like counting the grains of sand along the beach. Joseph and his wife had 2 sons before the famine began. The first son was named Manasseh, which means God has let me forget all my troubles and my family back home. His second son was named Ephraim, which means God has made me a success in the land where I suffered. Wow. Egypt's 7 years of plenty came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began just as Joseph has said. There was not enough food in other countries, but all over Egypt there was plenty. When the famine finally struck Egypt, the people asked the king for food, but he said, "Go to Joseph and do what he tells you to do." The famine became bad everywhere in Egypt, so Joseph opened the storehouses and sold the grain to the Egyptians. People from all over the world came to Egypt because the famine was severe in their countries. Wow. Genesis chapter 42 of the Holy Word of God. When Jacob found out there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why are you just sitting here, staring at one another? I have heard there is grain in Egypt. Now go down and buy some so we won't starve to death." 10 of Joseph's brothers went to Egypt to buy grain, but Jacob did not send Joseph's younger brother Benjamin with them. He was afraid that something might happen to him. So Jacob's sons joined the others from Canaan who were going to Egypt because of the terrible famine. Since Joseph was governor of Egypt and in charge of selling grain, his brothers came to him and bowed with their faces to the ground. They did not recognize Joseph, but right away he knew who they were. Though he pretended not to know, instead he spoke harshly and asked, "Where do you come from?" "From the land of Canaan," they answered. "We've come here to buy grain." Joseph remembered what he had dreamed about them and said, "You are spies. You've come here to find out where our country is weak." "No, sir," they replied. "We are your servants, and we have only come to buy grain. We are honest men, and we come from the same family. We're not spies." "That isn't so," Joseph insisted. "You've come here to find out where our country is weak." But they explained, "Sir, we come from a family of 12 brothers. The youngest is still with our father in Canaan, and one of our brothers is dead." They thought their brother was dead. They sold him. They sold him years ago. They sold him years ago because they were jealous of him. And then he got sold to Egypt, and now he's governor of Egypt. And now they're coming back to their own brother, and they don't recognize him. It's amazing how God works, isn't it, everyone? Joseph replied, "It's just like I said, you're spies, and I'm going to find out who you really are. I swear by the life of the king that you won't leave this place until your youngest brother comes here. Choose one of you to go after your brother while the rest of you stay here in jail. That will show whether you are telling the truth. But if you are lying, I swear by the life of the king that you are spies." Joseph kept them all under guard for 3 days before saying to them, "Since I respect God, I'll give you a chance to save your lives. If you are honest men, one of you must stay here in jail, and the rest of you can take the grain back to your starving families. But you must bring your youngest brother to me. Then I'll know that you are telling the truth, and you won't be put to death." He's kind of messing with them, right? He knows they're not spies. He knows they're his brothers, and he wants to send them home with food. But he's kind of letting them have it, right? Because they let him have it. They sold him as a slave, and he got separated from his family. And now they're coming to him, and they're asking him for food, right? Joseph's brothers agreed and said to one another, "We're being punished because of Joseph. We saw the trouble he was in, but we refused to help him when he begged us. That's why these terrible things are happening." Reuben spoke up, "Didn't I tell you not to harm the boy? But you wouldn't listen, and now we have to pay the price for killing him." They did not know that Joseph could understand them, since he was speaking through an interpreter. Joseph turned away from them and cried, but soon he turned back and spoke to them again. Then he had Simeon tied up and taken away while they watched. So Joseph's broken. He's crying. He doesn't know how to deal with this. He's in a position now where he could just really take revenge on them for what they did to him. But he doesn't want to do that. He's a man of God. And now he's broken inside. His brothers are here. It's his family. He loves his brothers, right? He didn't want to be sold. So he turns around and he cries, right? He cries. This thing is really messing with his emotions. You can only imagine, you know? The people that sold you are now back, and you're in a really strong position, and it's just like, what do you do, right? Joseph gave orders for his brothers' grain sacks to be filled with grain and for their money to be put in their sacks. He also gave order for them to be given food for their journey home. After this was done, they each loaded the grain on their donkeys and left. When they stopped for the night, one of them opened his sack to get some grain for his donkey, and right away he saw his money bag. "Here's my money," he told his brothers. "Right here, my sack." They were trembling with fear as they stared at one another and asked themselves, "What has God done to us?" When they returned to the land of Canaan, they told their father Jacob everything that had happened to them. "The governor of Egypt was rude and treated us like spies, but we told him we are honest men, not spies. We come from a family of 12 brothers. The youngest is still with our father in Canaan, and the other is dead." Then the governor of Egypt told us, "I'll find out if you really are honest. Leave one of your brothers here with me while you take the grain to your starving families, but bring your youngest brother to me so I can be certain that you are honest men and not spies. After that, I'll let your other brother go free, and you can stay here and trade." When the brothers started emptying their sacks of grain, they found their money bags in them. They were frightened, and so was their father Jacob, who said, "You have already taken my sons Joseph and Simeon from me, and now you want to take away Benjamin? Everything is against me." Reuben spoke up, "Father, if I don't bring Benjamin back, you can kill both of my sons. But trust me with him, and I will bring him back." But Jacob said, "I won't let my son Benjamin go down to Egypt with the rest of you. His brother is already dead, and he is the only son I have left. I am an old man, and if anything happens to him on the way, I'll die from sorrow, and all of you will be to blame." Man, so they don't know that God has already taken care of everything. They have absolutely nothing to worry about, but they don't know this, right? They don't know this yet. And man, we really got to take a lesson from this, right? When everything seems like it's going crazy, right? Don't worry. Because maybe from your view, everything is crazy, but from God's view, he's already taken care of it. He's already got the answer in place. Everything is going to be okay. You don't have nothing to worry about. Just trust in God. Trust him, man of God. Trust him, woman of God. The man and woman of God needs not worry about these things that happen outside the body, because God will take care of his own. Your job is to look for him, seek him, hold on to Jesus Christ like you've never held on to anyone or anything in your whole entire life. That's your job. Do what he wants you to do, and he'll take care of yours. He'll take care of yours. We're going to end it right there, and then we're going to start another episode, and we'll continue off at Genesis chapter 43.